There's a little jar in your kitchen that cost you about $3. You grate a tiny bit onto eggnog once a year, then forget it exists for the next 12 months. Nutmeg. 400 years ago, this little seed was one of the most valuable things on the entire planet. People got rich on it. People lied about it. People killed for it. And here's the part nobody tells you. This spice, the one going stale in your cupboard right now, is the reason the biggest city in America is called New York, and not New Amsterdam. Yeah, the reason it's not I Heart New Amsterdam on a million t-shirts, a spice you can't even remember buying. Stay with me. Because to understand how a $3 jar bought Manhattan, you need three things. It only grew in one place on Earth. People believed it cured the plague, and one man was willing to erase an entire population to control it. Let's start with why this little nut was worth a fortune. For most of history, nutmeg grew in exactly one place on Earth, a handful of tiny volcanic islands in what's now Indonesia, called the Banda Islands, specks in the ocean, smaller than most airports, and that was the whole world's supply. If you wanted nutmeg anywhere, from London to Beijing, it started here. And the money was insane. In Banda, you could buy 10 pounds of nutmeg for less than a single English penny. Carry that same nutmeg to Europe, and it sold for a small fortune, a markup of around 60,000%. To put that in perspective, imagine buying a cup of coffee for 1 cent and selling it for $600. That was the nutmeg trade. So why would anyone pay that? Partly flavor, partly status, but mostly fear. Because people believed nutmeg could protect you from the deadliest thing alive, the plague. When the Black Death tore through Europe, doctors had a theory. Disease traveled through bad air. So if you could wrap yourself in something powerful and fragrant, maybe you could block it out. And nutmeg was about the most powerful, fragrant, expensive thing money could buy. So the rich carried it, wore it, breathed it in, convinced it was keeping them alive. It was not. Nutmeg does absolutely nothing against the plague. So the most valuable spice on Earth was basically a luxury good propped up by a health myth, a 400-year-old wellness scam. Honestly, some things never change. But the myth was enough. Demand exploded. And when something is worth that much and comes from just a few tiny islands, empires come for it. Now here's the part of this story that almost never gets told. In the 1600s, the Dutch, through a company called the VOC, one of the first giant corporations in history, decided they didn't just want to trade nutmeg, they wanted to own all of it. Every tree, forever. There was just one problem. People already lived on the Banda Islands. The Bandanese had been growing and trading this spice for centuries, with whoever they pleased. So in 1621, a VOC governor named Jan Pieterszoon Cohen sailed in to force a monopoly. What followed wasn't really a battle, it was an erasure. Of the roughly 15,000 people who lived on Banda, about 90% were killed, enslaved, or driven from their homes. An entire people, almost wiped off the map, to control the price of a spice. Historians today call it a genocide, and it's barely a footnote in most history books. So that innocent little jar in your kitchen has a much darker past than its price tag suggests. But there was one tiny scrap of Banda the Dutch could not grab, and it's about to redraw the map of the world. Picture the smallest island you can imagine, about 2 miles long, covered end to end in nutmeg trees. Its name was Run, and it belonged not to the Dutch, but to the English. A few years earlier, an Englishman named Nathaniel Courthope had landed on Run, and the islanders agreed to accept the English king. As the story goes, Courthope and just a few dozen men held that speck of an island against a Dutch siege for over 4 years, surrounded, outnumbered, refusing to give it up, until he was finally killed. To England, Run was a point of pride and a foothold in the richest trade on Earth. To the Dutch, it was the last splinter standing between them and total control of nutmeg. 2 global empires locked in a standoff over an island you could walk across in an afternoon. And the two of them were about to make a deal that nobody at the time understood the consequences of. Fast forward to 1667. England and the Dutch had been at war again, including on the other side of the planet. And over in North America, the Dutch had a colony, a muddy little trading port at the tip of an island the locals called Manhattan. They named the town New Amsterdam. A few years earlier, in 1664, the English had sailed in and simply taken it. renaming it after their Duke of York. New York. So when the two sides finally signed a peace treaty, the Treaty of Breda, they didn't do some dramatic handshake swap. The deal was much simpler. Everybody just keeps whatever they're already holding. And what were they holding? The English kept that muddy little port, Manhattan. The Dutch kept their precious nutmeg island, Run. And here's the twist that makes this my favorite story. At the time, the Dutch were sure they had gotten the better deal. And of course they were. One side walked away with a tiny island that printed money. The other side got a swamp. Who's the fool here? One of those two places became the financial capital of the world. The other one you had never heard of until 90 seconds ago. And the final irony? The whole empire was built on sand. Because about a century later, the Dutch monopoly finally cracked. The French smuggled nutmeg seedlings out and planted them somewhere else. Then the British did the same, on an island called Grenada in Zanzibar, anywhere the trees would take. And the moment nutmeg grew in more than one place, it stopped being magic. The price collapsed. The spice that emptied an island and redrew the map of the world quietly became the thing you forget to put in your eggnog. A $3 jar. Grenada, by the way, was so grateful for it that they put a nutmeg right on their national flag. The only flag on Earth with a food on it. So next time you reach for that little jar, hold it for just a second. People got rich on it. A people were nearly erased for it. Two empires went to war over it. And because of it, the greatest city in America is called New York. And not New Amsterdam. Not bad for something you can't even remember buying. This has been Doodle History. Thanks for watching, and stay curious.